Buckle up for what the AV Club is calling a ferociously entertaining, beautifully orchestrated thrill ride, and what the Hollywood Reporter has praised as a menacing supernatural suspenser. Oddity follows Darcy, a self-proclaimed psychic and collector of cursed items, who is in the pursuit of uncovering the truth behind her sister's brutal murder. Convinced that there was more to her murder than people know, Darcy brings out the most dangerous items from her cursed collection to help exact revenge. Own the film critics are deeming the scariest movie of the year. Oddity is now available on DVD and Blu-ray. Order today on Amazon.com. In honor of the 10th anniversary of the iconic horror film The Babadook, the modern classic returns with its DVD and Blu-ray 10th anniversary edition, featuring over 2 hours of bonus features. 6 years after the violent death of her husband, Amelia is at a loss. She struggles to discipline her out-of-control 6-year-old Samuel, whose dreams are plagued by a monster he believes is coming to kill them both. A flat-out masterpiece, praised IndieWire, with Empire calling The Babadook one of the strongest, most effective horror films. Own the 10th anniversary edition of The Babadook today, now available on DVD and Blu-ray.
It's Croctober, the official celebration of Crocs fans like you. So whether you like to rock your classic clogs, get cozy and fuss-lined, personalize with your favorite Jibbitz charms, or even, dress up like a clog for Halloween, it's time to tell your story and share your style. Join the Croctober celebration with Crocs fans around the world. Go to crocs.com to discover the range of shoes and find a pair that's iconic like you. Crocs, celebrating you all month long.
Slashers, huh? What's your favorite scary movie?
Not that one.
And welcome back to Micro Queers. It's our sporadic queer horror movie roundup. And I'm Joe.
And I'm Trace, and we are discussing a video game streaming horror film called Livescreamers, written and directed by one Michelle Iannantuono.
I love your description because it makes it sound like the movie is...
a recorded live stream.
It isn't exactly what you just said. Folks, your best comparison is the movie Stay Alive, only good.
Yeah, so it's basically Unfriended meets Stay Alive with a dash of Saw thrown in. Which, have you seen Stay Alive? I don't remember if we've talked about this before.
Oh, yeah, I saw it, but like ages ago.
Same. It's the first movie I ever remember seeing in a theater that I actively was like, I want my money back. Like, I don't want to watch this movie anymore.
Okay, that's interesting. I don't feel as badly about it. Like, I actually think we should cover it one day.
Everyone
but
does.
That film feels tampered with to me. Like, there's an interesting idea. There's a kernel of a great movie in there. And then you get what you get. And
yeah.
I guess that's why I said that this movie is more successful, because I feel like it has a better awareness of the kinds of things you want to see. And then it's like, we just don't have, a $30 million budget to back it up.
Yeah, absolutely. But we also, we stay completely in this live stream. Well, it's not really a live stream, though, right? Because they're not actually streaming this, are they?
No, that was one of the questions that I had, because this definitely feels like something that they would have done live. And it wasn't until about 2/3 of the way through the film when they were like, somebody's going to find this. And, then it'll all come out. And I thought, oh, okay, I guess this is something that they would edit after the fact.
Yeah, but then it's not a live stream, which means it really shouldn't be called Livescreamers.
Oh, come on. You can't pass up that title.
Which actually, on that note, everyone, so this is a sequel to a 2018 film called Livescream, which was also written and directed by Iannantuono. So I have not heard of or seen that film, but from what I can tell, you don't need to have seen it to enjoy this film, because I understood everything that was going on here.
Yeah, if this is a sequel, it definitely doesn't play like one.
Yeah, actually, the IMDb summary for Livescreamers specifically says it's a sequel to Livescream. So I saw that after the fact.
Okay, all right.
But nevertheless, Joe, would you recommend this movie?
I would, yeah. I actually had a good amount of fun with this. I think there's a couple of plot points that I don't think are entirely successful, but overall, I was pretty engaged with this film.
I was too. I was actually quite surprised with this film, but I will agree with you. I think things start to unravel in the third act, but for the most part, up until then, I was really enjoying this ride.
Yeah, so folks, if you haven't seen this, it is a group who go under the company name Janus, and they do video game live streaming, and they're a mix of different people. They kind of branded themselves as diverse. So we've got, a non-binary black person. We've got another black man. We've got a guy who games with his best friend who watches, and initially you think that they're queer coded, but it turns out that they're actually just doing it for the slash fiction and the other fun stuff like that. You've got the hot girl and her husband. They're secretly having marital problems. You've got the super happy Asian girl. So of course she's the first to die. And then there's a girl who has won a contest who manages the chat thread that the whole site operates under, as well as the head boss.
Yes. And so the girl, though, she's like a super fan, but it's like, because I'm not really immersed in this aspect of the gaming community. Like, I don't get on Twitch and like watch people, but it's like the Lucy character who's the super fan, like manages like the fan Discord servers. And I guess like what we do with our Facebook group for Horror Queers is what she does with like those other newfangled technological things that bring people together. That's not Facebook.
Yeah, and we hear that they've got like a huge number of followers, so it makes sense that they would have asked a dedicated superfan to kind of moderate that on their behalf because it's free labor. And as we learn over the course of this film, the company does have a lot of problems and there's infighting. The personalities are all very big and they all have their sort of niche areas that they think that they're the best and they should be more recognized. And that's part of where the fun comes in. So as you're watching them play this underground game that is actively killing them in real life, we're also unpacking all the bullshit that's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's pretty par for the course, right? Like a group that seems all happy and harmonious is actually not, and it takes this thing like a game to turn them against each other. I think for me the biggest thing that I was really appreciative of is that it is very clear that this writer and director is immersed in the gaming world.
Right.
I know you're not much of a gamer, Joe, but like I'm like that middle ground where like I do game. I play PlayStation games, I play Nintendo games, but I'm not like in MMORPGs. I don't look at streaming on Twitch. Like, I don't watch any of that stuff. But even still, for my, I'm going to say basic gaming knowledge, I could pick up on a lot of the attention to detail.
Right.
The Iannantuono like put into this film. I mean, down to like the, posters for games like Heavy Rain and Until Dawn, to the video game itself. Like the style is like this Resident Evil style mansion, to like taking game controls from games that I was familiar with. Like I had a lot of fun for most of this movie. Just be like, oh, I know that. I know what that's referencing. I know what that's referencing.
Yeah. And even someone like me who isn't super familiar with games and isn't really immersed in the game world. Like my husband is a gamer, but he plays a very specific kind of like open world gaming. So I'm a little bit familiar with some of this kind of stuff, but it's all presented in a way that is so straightforward that even if you don't spend a lot of time in gaming world or watching replays of games, you can still easily follow the plot.
Oh, yeah. Like, it doesn't matter if you don't get the whole "will we find you in another castle" reference. It's just there for us fans who get it, which, by the way, do you know what that is?
Yes, I get what that is.
I didn't know.
I think a reference to The Legend of Zelda is pretty fucking obvious, as well as Super Mario Brothers.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, I was like, Joe, that's not Zelda, that's Mario Brothers. Okay. So, but yeah, so basically they get this game and they're going to play through it for this like beta testing thing. And of course, yes, it's a game that kills you. And we move through set piece to set piece as we kind of get like a video game sequence paired with a death and some infighting, right? That's kind of the structure of this film.
More or less, yeah. And as the film goes on, you get more and more backstory about what is breaking up the group. But obviously, we're also killing off the people. So it kind of becomes more focalized on bigger picture issues about like money and who is sort of eating up all the oxygen in the room. And I think the order in which people die makes pretty good sense.
Right.
Although I will confess that I don't love all the reasoning behind the deaths.
Interesting. Well, we could dive into that a little bit because, yeah, I don't mind the order. I do like a lot of the conversations this film is having. It just sometimes it's a bit like, it feels a bit preachy at times. Like sometimes it worked for me, sometimes it didn't. But I was like, oh, look, I'm glad that this is a movie that's having these conversations at least.
Yeah. I could imagine some people watching this and feeling like, ooh, I didn't really know that could be an issue in the gaming world. But I think if you're at all versed in the way that particularly fan groups work or companies where there can be toxicity, some of this is going to sound very... I'm not going to say obvious, but yeah, the way that people broach it feels as though it's explaining it to somebody who had no idea that this could happen. So,
yes.
And maybe that's also just because we are queer. So some of these conversations feel like, oh, okay, we're maybe talking about things like Gamergate or just the way that we treat Black people on the internet.
100%. We're also like ripping from the headlines here because the entire like bit about Taylor's arc, Taylor is our kind of like white guy married to the pretty girl in the group, but then it's revealed, oops, he's been talking to fans and kind of absorbing that attention, and some of them have been minors, and he's been requesting photos from them. Like, this was a real life thing that just happened, I want to say, earlier this year.
Oh, okay. Well, I unfortunately think that's not a new thing.
Right. I'm sorry. It was one that made headlines to where even I saw it earlier this year, but I'm sure it's not the first time this has happened.
Yeah. So that's one of the big issues. We find out that Mitch, the guy who owns the company, covered for Taylor. So he knew that Taylor was speaking to underage girls, and like to the point that some of these girls had actually left the group forums and that kind of stuff. So like it's implied that it's bad enough that he probably should have been charged with something.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, but he dies, so it's fine.
Well, yeah. And then there's also our non-binary character, Dice, who is played by Maddox Julian Slide, and they are Black, and so it's like a multitude of issues where they're kind of isolated. They recognize themselves as the best game player, but they feel like they don't ever get any of that attention. So I actually found that this was the issue that I latched onto the most, not just because this character is out and proud queer,
right,
but also they feel lost in the mix among these other people and they don't feel heard, but it also sometimes forces them to be abrasive to other people and they can't ask for help. Yeah. I was like, ooh, this is a little relatable.
Yeah, no, 100% relatable. This is the one specifically where it got a little preachy to me because this feels like that we spend the most amount of time on this particular issue, which is a big one. But then I guess I want to ask then, is this where your issues with the reasoning for the death starts to come up with Dice's death?
I think part of it was that I expected them to be dying in ways that kind of aligned with why they weren't succeeding. This one does work for me because Dice is very clear that one of the issues that they're affected by is their wrists are starting to go. So like they need a better medical plan. They need more money. They need to be more recognized to make that money. And they end up dying because they literally cannot control the controller to get themselves out of a life-threatening situation. So I was like, oh, that one actually works well for me. The one that doesn't work well for me is the guys who are coded queer but it's like a joke and they do it just to basically activate their respective fan base. And it felt like a narrative contrivance to have the one guy who's not actually playing the whole time. He's just an observer. He's there on the show because he's popular with this other dude. And he ends up having like a non-player personality.
That was actually something I had an issue with because it's NPC, non-playable character. But
there we go.
But Mitch, he says, oh, he was killed by the NPC. And I was like, wait a minute, non-playable character means a non-playable character, like a character in the game that you can't play as, that you interact with. He was killed by an avatar, by Davy's avatar.
Right.
But Yes, I agree with you. This, because it was weird. It was like the real life Davy took over Avatar Davy's mind and then killed John because this didn't make any sense logically. Like, it would have made more sense if Davy had actually been queer, actually harbored some kind of like love for the John character, and then was driven to kill him for some reason or another, you know?
Yeah. What ends up playing out is that you assume that whatever is killing them in the game that then kills them in real life just takes over this human being's body because they're not playable. So they're just an open body that we can control in the real world. But it doesn't entirely make sense.
No.
And it just wasn't satisfying considering the way that we had built up the other deaths in the film.
I agree. I'll go back to Dice's. What I did like about Dice's death, though, is that, like, Dice dies because, you know, like, they have isolated themselves. They feel alone, and so they have shut out any, like, outside help. And so when they are in their saw trap, for lack of a better term, they refuse to seek help. Even though, I guess they're just meant to do quick time events, which is why they end up dying, because they can't do it, but still.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one is a little bit frustrating because we spent so much time talking about how they need to be part of the group and they, you know, don't react well to that. But it feels like, well, when you know that you're about to die, it would be more meaningful to have a character try to make that sort of Hail Mary or the olive branch or something like that. And we do have this other character who comes over and tries to help them out, and it's just a little bit too late. So that part did work for me, but it still felt like an opportunity to give that character not a moment of grace, but a moment of realization, you know, especially when things are literally life or death. I can't ask for help.
Well, so, okay. I don't know. Is it like a through line that they're dying kind of according to their person? Because even Gwen dying in this like riff on this game called Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes, you know, where it's like, oh, she has to defuse a bomb, but she can't, like, she has to listen to everyone else. That's not, how is that tying into her as a character? Unless it's just like,
it's not.
She's not looking at any of the red flags at her husband, who's like kind of a pedophile.
Yeah, because Gwen's big story arc is that she kind of knew her husband was a bit of an adulterer, like they had had previous conversations about it, but more to the point, she wants to be seen as something more than just like tits and ass, because she's the hot girl of the group.
Right. Oh, and this is meant to be an intellectual challenge.
Yeah, this one just feels like, oh, people didn't read the instructions properly. They didn't work together, because as we get closer and closer to the end of the game, it becomes more and more clear that they are stronger when they work together. And every time they don't work as a team, that's often when somebody dies. But a lot of these also feel like, well, somebody was going to die no matter what. It's very Saw 5.
Yes, I was thinking Saw 5 the entire time. And this sequence I liked a lot because, so Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes is one of those games where, at least when I played it, it's a virtual reality game. So like the person in the Gwen role has the headset on while everyone else can read the instructions on the TV screen. But like, they can't see what you're looking at and you don't know what they're looking at. So it is a team making exercise, but it's also very stressful when there's a ticking clock.
Sure. Yeah. I like this sequence a lot because it becomes increasingly more complicated each time they think that they're going to be able to defuse this bomb, because it looks like all you have to do is solve 2 puzzles, and then the puzzles are actually way more complicated, and then there's a third puzzle. But it also feels like the third puzzle was impossible to solve in time.
Some of these feel like Amanda did them and not John Kramer. Okay, let's just kind of go towards the end, because we have, this Lucy-Nemo relationship. You know, Lucy is our fan. Joe, did you know that she was going to be Nemo's ex-stalker fan?
100% I did.
100%.
Yeah, this was more, I was trying to figure out if Lucy, if it was going to be revealed that she had created the game and she had set this all up because these people had failed her as a fan and she wanted to get revenge on them. And even though I think that would have been more basic, I do ultimately think it would have been more satisfying than having Nemo, who has been the most rational person in this entire fucking game. Okay, so folks, let us unpack this. So Lucy was operating under a fan name, and she reached out to Nemo and essentially said, I need you to be my friend or I'm going to die by suicide. And he had to make a decision. Do I just block this person because I don't know them and they're just a fan, or do I report them and try to get them help? So he does the latter. He's a good person, but then that experience traumatizes him. So he ends up shutting down all of his DMs. He doesn't engage with the fan base anymore, and it becomes an issue with him and Mitch, the guy who owns the game.
Right.
And then when he learns that Lucy is this fan, and the reason that she won this contest and she wanted to be here is because she's better and she wants to be his friend again. I was like, okay, you could just have him be like, nope, that's an overstep. I drew this boundary. And instead he actively kills her.
Yeah, it's a thing where I wish they maybe would have played this up a bit more with the stalking element of Lucy, because at the end of the day, that is kind of what this is.
It's a little bit, yeah.
I mean, at least, she manipulated her way to get into the studio just so she could talk to him. Like, unfortunately, it's like, girl, like, he doesn't want to talk to you. Like, let it go. I understand all the reasoning behind what happens in this last, like, climactic bit, but I agree with you. It's not very satisfying.
I think it feels a bit too much like a heel turn for Nemo. I needed to see him process it a little bit more.
Yeah.
And also, we're floating this idea that all of the people who die in the game become trapped in this game mansion. And Nemo has this decision where he can either kill Lucy and get a kind of personal vengeance against the person who hurt him mentally, or he can burn down the entire game.
Which might kill them in the process.
Yeah, but it would free everybody. And it's not just like these 8 people in this room. It's all the other people who died playing the game. So there's possibly, dozens, 50, 100 people. And I don't know. He struck me as the kind of character who would have burnt it all down. And maybe that's like, not a good look for a black character in a horror film. I don't know that we need a black character to be a martyr, especially for other white people.
Sure.
But at the same time, it felt out of character for him to make this decision.
I agree with you. This ended with kind of a whimper for me, whereas I do think, like, again, as I said, I was in this for most of it.
Yeah.
But I wonder also if it's, like, meant to be, like, leading into a sequel of some sort, because I would
potentially
assume, I don't know, that some of the portraits we see on the wall are maybe a character or characters from the first movie.
And I will say, watching them explore this game and solve traps and do that kind of stuff, yeah, like, it's really interesting stuff. It's exciting stuff, and it's really easy to get sucked into this world. So I'm with you. I like the gameplay. I like, unpacking some of the issues that are pervasive in gaming as a culture, as a larger kind of project. And I thought many of the performances were pretty good. Initially, it seemed a little dicey, but once I kind of settled into who the characters were, it felt like they all gelled a little bit better. So overall, I did like this film. I think I'm somewhere between about a 3 and a 3.5, but I would happily watch a sequel.
I would as well. I also, like, the kind of building these rules, because all these people are in the same room, like, streaming with each other, but they don't ever seem to see when the other person dies. They always see the aftermath. But I like that we just get a lot of blood splatter on these guys as they are just streaming their lives away. But
sure,
yeah, I agree with you. I'm probably somewhere between a 3 and a 3.5 as well. Definitely recommend. Not perfect, but it's also, like, I mean, I'm assuming a really, like, low budget affair. So, like, I was impressed with it, especially with the game footage.
Yeah,
we got a lot of this.
Yeah, no, it looks good. It's not one of those, like, it looks a little bit shoddy. It's like, oh, I could see this game being a real game that people have played and we're just repurposing it. But no, they clearly had to make this game for this movie.
Yeah. It looks like a late 2000s, early 2010s PC game. That's what I'll say on that. All right. Well, everyone, that has been Live Screamers. Let us know what you saw. And if you've actually seen the original film, let us know what you think of that, too. But until next time, we can cross out Live Screamers.
There we go. And cross out micro queers.